Ahoy, and welcome into another mind expanding episode of Not Allowed to Die, your podcast about mental health treatment from the therapist perspective. I am your host, Dan Magler, social worker and life enthusiast, and alongside me, as always, is Mariska, the two-tooth Patterdale Terrier, and she is not licking her paws. And you know what that means, you Mariskateers, you Mariskavites? It means that you are doing an excellent job of rating, reviewing, and telling a friend about the podcast. So again, as we head into those dog days of August, and you're thinking about the Cubs and how bad they're doing, and you're saying, all right, how did I get through another day? And you turn to Andre Dawson in the stands, you say, Andre, you've been through this before. And if you think you might need a therapist, there's a great podcast you should learn about. And you send him a link to Not Allowed to Die, and then you have a wonderful day. Mariska wants me to remind you as well that we are creating this podcast in part to draw attention to Pause for Patrick. Pause for Patrick is a nonprofit organization dedicated to bringing the love of animals to people who need it the most. So if you know a young person, 30 and younger, who could benefit from having an emotional support animal, tell them to go to pauseforpatrick.org. And if they need help adopting an animal from a shelter, Pause for Patrick can help them pay those shelter fees. And if they need an ESA letter, Pause for Patrick can get them hooked up with a therapist to write that ESA letter. Now, Mariska is extra super excited today because she always gets super pumped. And in the summer, we tend to have more people over. We have more guests. And today, we don't just have a guest. We have an incredibly dynamic guest. So we have Amanda Hill. And Amanda is a licensed mental health counselor, nationally certified counselor, board certified coach, published author, podcast host, and founder of Connections of Hope Counseling. With more than 20 years of experience, she specializes in relationships, family dynamics, trauma, and personal growth, helping people break unhealthy patterns and build healthier, more fulfilling lives. So Amanda, we are so excited to have you today. And can you tell us a little bit about your journey and what brought you here?
Yeah, oh gosh, where do I start? Number 5 of 6 kids, grew up, actually went to college to be a doctor, changed my major my senior year because I fell in love with the subject of psychology. And that was many, many years ago, but I am 20 solid years into working with people as a therapist. Opened my own practice about 6 years ago, so 2020, and have several different locations with multiple therapists working for me. And then, as you said, it's pretty recent for me, started a podcast after publishing my first book. Hopefully there will be more, just to kind of get the word out there and talk a little bit more about family dysfunction, which was what my book was about. So I'm just kind of all over the place right now in regards to mental health. But it is a passion of mine. I love everything about it.
For people who have written books and memoirs and things like that, talking about their own experience, one of the things I always find challenging, even here on the podcast, is talking about, family members or other things and being personal, but not sharing too much of the story that's not necessarily mine to tell. How did you navigate that? And how do you navigate that, whether with your podcast and with the book, of figuring out, okay, I can tell this story or I can't tell this story? Because, how did you work your way through that?
So, with my book, I used my own experience with family dysfunction. Big family, lots of really strong personalities, but I really didn't tell specific stories in my book. So, it wasn't really personal in that regard, where, I was walking you through certain things that happened. I was talking more about the concepts of family dysfunction and how to manage. So, that one I didn't really have as much of a concern about. With clients, as far as podcasts and maybe even just talking to other clients, if there's a situation that's relevant to what they're going through that I've worked with somebody else, I think that for the most part, unless someone is in active sessions with me, a current client, I probably would not share those stories because those people are currently in therapy. But I do share, I worked with a client once who blah, 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 blah. I will tell the story. I obviously never name names. And sometimes you might shift a little of the parts of the story so that if that client were to be listening, that they wouldn't know 100% that was theirs and maybe relate to. But I think there's so much strength in sharing stories of how other people have struggled, because when we hear that and we can relate to it, it makes us want to make changes more.
And how about, even in sessions, when you're talking to a client who's been through something similar that you can really relate to as a clinician through your own personal experience? What's that lens that you're using to decide how much disclosure to share about your own story?
Yeah.
And how do you find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, that takes me back to grad school when it was kind of like you don't self-disclose, never self-disclose. And then maybe if you do, I do remember them saying ask the client permission. Like it would it be okay with you if I disclose a little bit about how what you're going through is relevant to me based off something I've been through. And I've not had a client say no to me
Mhm.
yet. If they did say no, then obviously I wouldn't. But I think for the most part, not that I am thrilled that I have trauma of my own, or that I've gone through any hardship, but in a lot of ways, I try to look at that as um, kind of so powerful in the work I do with people because it allows me to actually empathize with them, not just sympathize. And I know as therapists, we are called to empathize anyway, but it's like a legit empathizing because I know what they're going through because I've been through it. And I think that sharing that with your clients with their permission actually can be extremely powerful and help your client relate to you so much more and honestly trust you more because you've been through it and so you're sharing some of that information.
When you go back to those early days right after grad school and you're working with some of your first clients, do you remember any times when you were like, they taught us this in grad school, but I'm kind of
Mhm.
feeling maybe my more authentic self is going to be a better fit for this? So can you think of any examples where, hey, I know that this is what they said, but to do what's
Mhm.
best for this client in this moment, I think I need to shift and find my own voice that's a little bit different than what they taught me.
I mean, it'd take me a minute to think of a specific situation, but I know that happened a lot. And I think more than anything in the very beginning, we have that imposter syndrome. So I had a lot of that. I remember one of the first clients I had on my own. This was post grad school, but still, getting your hours, and he was a doctor. And I was just like, I can't treat a doctor. Like, they're so much smarter than me. Like, I did not in my head, I just went into every session so insecure because I saw him as a doctor that has just done so much more education. And maybe not totally related to what you're asking me, but I think over the years, what I have learned and what I repeatedly tell myself is that I'm an expert in this field, and so I don't care if you're a physicist or the, smartest person in the world, you probably not going to know what I know based on the years I have spent. But that took me many years to get to. And that's something that, as I, in my practice, hire clinicians on, I encourage them to take on clients and to look at them as like, you are here to help them and you have a lot of knowledge that you might not even be aware is something that your clients don't know, and go in with that confidence and just do your best. I mean, this is another thing I struggle with. We're not meant to fix our clients. And so I think as therapists, we all have had those moments where it's like right at your grip, you can't, like, I want to change it but it's not happening, and it's like, what am I doing wrong? And I've had my own staff stop me and be like, you're not responsible, you can't do more work than your client's doing.
Mhm.
That was a tough lesson for me and I still struggle with it sometimes, but remembering like I'm doing my job to be here and support you, and then letting the client do their work on their own time.
No, to piggyback on what you're saying, I remember early on in my career when I would work with parents of teenagers, and
Mm,
they would ask, well, do you have kids? And it's like, no, I'm 25 at that
yep.
time, and I no, I
Yep.
don't know what it's like to parent my own teenager, but
Yes.
I might be more of an expert. I have worked with at that point,
Yeah.
dozens, or now I've worked with 1,000 teenagers. So, but
Yeah.
then
Yep.
again, I also like to fall back on the idea that you don't need to be a genius to do this job because the clients know
Mhm.
90% of what they already know. We're
Yep.
just bringing out their own knowledge. So,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
physicist, he can work through the
Mhm.
problem. I just have to help him
Mhm.
to figure out what he already knows. I
Right.
wouldn't understand the math if he said it, but
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, that is so true. I remember the first couple times I took marital couples, and I was married. I got married young, but I was young. And so when you get a marriage or a couple come in that's in their 40s or 50s and they've been married for 20 years and they're struggling and you're 25, sitting there. I did have a couple people like, I don't think you can help us.
Hmm.
Um, Also, some self disclosure here, I did get divorced, and I have had uh, marital couples or people ask me, like, well, have you been married? If they can see I don't have a ring on.
Hmm.
And I will tell them I've shared that I was married, but I got divorced. And then those couples sometimes struggle with me being their therapist because I got divorced. And one thing I always say, if anyone does bring it up, is it takes two people to make a marriage work.
Hmm.
And of course, every relationship is full of conflict and different personalities and whatnot, but I could have been the best partner ever. But it takes two people. If you don't have two people working on a marriage, it doesn't have anything to do with me being a therapist or being a good couples therapist. So I definitely got a little bit of that, especially with couples. Maybe not as much when I was young, but like you said, the judgment when they come in and see someone young, they're like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Well, and when I'm doing clinical supervision for people, I think a lot of young
Mhm.
therapists that I work with, they feel like hypocrites if their life feels like a dumpster fire and their romantic life is not going great and doing whatever, and then they're trying to come in
Yeah,
and provide counseling to other people. But so often we can give better help to other people than we can to ourselves
it's
because
so
we do have
true.
that separation. So, for
Yes.
any therapists who are listening to this, even if your life is not going exactly the way you want it
Yeah.
to, and you're having struggles with your siblings or your parents or whatever else, it doesn't mean that
Mhm.
you can't be an incredible help to other
Yeah.
people. So
Yeah.
we don't, therapists or people who are in therapy don't assume that your therapist's lives are perfect and they're handling everything
Mhm.
perfect and their checkbook is always
Yeah.
perfectly balanced and they haven't done
Yeah.
anything wrong, because we're just human
Yeah.
beings struggling to make it through
Yeah.
as well.
And I don't know if you heard this, but I do joke sometimes with people when I was in school and I was getting my master's, they pretty much said like the first day of school, like chances are most of you have some sort of trauma or
Hmm.
serious issue or something that you have struggled with that has brought you into this field.
Hmm.
And I did find that relevant for me. I think a lot of the trauma that I went through, or maybe just, a lot of things that happen in your life and you just exist. And as I started to study and learn about human behavior, it was like light bulbs going off in my head and everything was starting to make sense. But a lot of times it is that, like, hey, do as I say, not as I do, because in real life, I know exactly what to do, especially in relationships, because that's a specialization of mine. But then I get into a relationship and I can't follow my own advice. And it just goes to show like emotion, when emotion is so strongly intertwined into the challenges that you have, it makes it a lot harder. It's not clear cut.
Now, you have been much braver than I would ever be in that you started your own practice and have hired other people. And so, what made you to decide? Like a lot of us take the laser route and we work with a psychiatrist who funnels us
Mhm.
clients and then they take care of the billing. What made you decide, you know what? No, I want to go out and do my own thing and set up my own practice separate from everyone else and maybe bring on a couple clinicians to work with me. So, what was, take me through like the mental journey that took you to that space?
Well, I'm a single mom. I have two kids that are, well, one turned 17 today, actually, is his birthday.
Wow, congrats.
17 and 19. So, um 6 years ago, maybe I'll go before that, 7, 8, 9 years ago, I was working for multiple different practices. So, private practice, kind of social work related jobs. I worked for BetterHelp. And right before I decided to open my practice, I had my own therapist who told me one day, she was like, you can't keep doing what you're doing. I was working four jobs,
Hmm.
crazy hours, and again, just trying to take care of my family, right? Like my kids. And I never really thought about doing private practice. That always seemed very overwhelming to me because I didn't know
Hmm.
enough about it. But honestly, thanks to her, she kind of stepped me through just the basics of what I would need to know to open my practice, because hers was a private practice. Showed me how to bill and everything. I used to do all my insurance billing. And this was in 2020. So if we all remember 2020, uh,
Yeah.
COVID and the election. And I feel like that year was probably the best year for me to open. I filled up really fast. The stress was high for people. I had no problem doing in person sessions, which a lot of people appreciated. And I was just so full that before that first year even came up, I had to make the decision of like, it's just going to be me, or what about the possibility of maybe expanding? And I don't know if it's just my personality, but I really don't like turning people away that need help. Like, I just really want to help everybody that comes my way. And along with my dad's help, he's a businessman, so he was able to kind of help me navigate the financials behind, starting to hire. But I hired, I think, two people right off the bat, got bigger spaces. And I will say the first couple of years was a little rocky because you're trying to figure out how to pay people, and there was a lot of dynamics with that I had to learn from. But as I've gotten into it now, I have 14 therapists who work for me, and we have 5 different locations, and I love it. So I would say for me, I did notice, and my personality is very, when we use, it's pop psychology, right? But left brained. I was very math, analytical, logical, science. I was pre-med in college. I changed my major at the last minute. So I actually do really well with the business side of it. And I think it's just so cool to see something grow. And, the need is there for people, for therapists. And so I'm constantly hiring. And although it's a little stressful, there's always like, you're going down this road and you hire someone new and then you kind of backtrack a little bit because you're getting them going, and then you catch back up and go faster, but I've kind of gotten used to the rhythm, and we have successfully been able to pretty much place almost everybody that comes to us, with very little wait times, probably more so for the littles that we get wait times sometimes. But it's just been, it's definitely a journey. There's definitely been some challenging times, but I am someone who likes a challenge too. So I think any therapist who might be listening to this, who's maybe debating, is that something that I want to do or not? If you are someone that handles challenges well, that doesn't kind of throw in the towel too easily, or that manages a lot of stress easily, you probably would enjoy it. Also, who doesn't want to work for themselves? So that's a bonus.
Do you, when you're interviewing or looking for therapists, are there certain things that you would say, okay, this is like, this person really fits with our ethos, or this person might be a great therapist, but they're not a fit for what we're doing at Connection? So what makes a person of the right fit for your kind of practice? And what would make you say, maybe not so much, like they're way too psychoanalytic, or they're, like
Yeah.
what would make you feel like they were the right kind of fit?
I have learned in my hiring at the beginning, I remember thinking like, how am I going to know? I've never interviewed anybody. And I did just kind of have a feel for it, but if I never turn a therapist away for a different approach, because I love that all therapists do therapy differently.
Hmm.
I have some therapists that I was like, I don't really know if they'll work out well, and they're amazing and their clients love them. And so I, when I hire people, I will say the biggest thing that I look for is my comfort when I talk to them,
Hmm.
because I know it's an interview and interviews can be nerve wracking. I try to just put them at ease, but also what makes the deciding factor for me when I'm interviewing someone is when I hang up from that interview, if I feel like it went well, like they were easy to talk to, there was some normal conversation, not just, weird question answer quiet stuff. Because as therapists, we should be trained to talk to anybody.
Hmm.
And I have, the times that I've interviewed someone that I haven't offered a job to has been typically because it's just very awkward. And maybe that's judgmental. Maybe they would be great with clients. But for me, I just look for that sense of comfort, that they give me. And of course, I'm looking for things that anyone does when you hire someone, like flexibility, hours, their experience and desire to help people. But outside of that, I haven't turned a lot of people away, if I'm honest. And I've just been really lucky. I have an amazing team of people. They're all incredible. It's like a second family for me.
Well, that's, yeah. I mean, I like to. I work at a school, and there are 3 of us social
Mhm.
workers on staff, and we all approach the job, as you were kind of saying, very differently. And
Yeah.
someone might not be the right fit for me, but they may be a
Mm-hmm.
perfect fit for the person to my left or the person to my right. And so
Yes.
sometimes, and therapy is really all about finding that right fit.
Yeah.
Sometimes people will ask me, how many sessions do you think people
Mm-hmm.
should give a therapist if they're not feeling the vibe? I usually say
Mm-hmm.
try to give it at least 3 sessions. And then
Yep.
if you're still not feeling it, then maybe, talking directly to the therapist, because
Mm-hmm.
the therapist is feeling it too. If they're
Yep.
in there and it's like pulling conversation out, that sucks for both the
Mm-hmm.
client and the therapist. And so
Yes.
if the therapist is competent, their feelings aren't going to be hurt. They're going to refer you to somebody
Mm-hmm.
else. But do you have a rule of thumb that you tell to clients or to the people, like, give it X number of sessions before making a decision of whether or not we're a fit?
Always. And it's the same for me with I say 2 to 3 sessions. I think three is fair because the first session's an intake. And I say that for every client that comes in. I think it's important to say that up front because especially for people that are new to it, I'm sure just like me, you've heard a lot of stories from people who are like, yeah, I tried therapy once. It was horrible. It was a waste of time. And it's like, you had the wrong therapist. And that doesn't even mean that therapist was a bad therapist. They just weren't the therapist for you, because every therapist has a chance to really help you and teach you something with what you're going on or what you have going on. So I always say, like, give me, 2 or 3 sessions. If after the third session you feel like you have gotten nothing out of the time that we've met together, I want you to tell me, because I have other people, whether it's in my practice or elsewhere, that I can refer you to. I might not be a good fit for you. I am very straight to the point. I can be person centered and I'm eclectic in a lot of ways, but I am like, we're going to move forward. And so if you want someone that just kind of sits and is more person centered, sits where you are, like, I'm not probably not going to be a good fit for you. And although clients don't really know what that means, I do think that it's really important as therapists that we share that with our clients, that it's okay for you to tell me, like, I don't feel like this is helping. And my feelings aren't going to be hurt because we're just different people. I say that much in the same sense that, like, not everybody is friends. My closest friends are my friends because we bond well. But your
Mhm.
friends I might not bond well with, and that's okay. We're all different.
Well, yeah, I always say therapy is supposed to be this like laboratory space where you can experiment with things. I mean, because the relationship between the therapist and the client, it is truly a relationship, but it's a relationship
Yes.
that's safer because your
Mm-hmm.
therapist isn't going to scream at you and freak out and throw something across the room.
Yes.
But for so many of
Yes.
our clients coming in, because they don't have a lot of experience of having that
Mm-hmm.
safety, it's hard for them to
Mm-hmm.
trust them and to
Yeah.
trust if they give that negative feedback. And
Yeah.
so frequently, I feel like and you're more of an expert in relationships, but I feel in the last 10 years, really, so much more ghosting is happening, particularly in
Yes.
romantic relationships. But
Yep.
also, I think it lends to everything else. It lends to people
Mm-hmm.
quitting by just not showing up to work anymore. It lends
Yep.
to,
Yep.
not just not making another therapy appointment instead of saying,
Yep.
hey,
Yeah.
I'm not really feeling super comfortable. I'm afraid I couldn't discuss.
Mm-hmm.
So, any thoughts you have about, like, do you feel, is it just me being old, or do you feel like it's a
Mm-hmm.
lot? There's been a big increase in the way people's
Yeah.
conflict avoidance and just disappearing on things.
100%. Yeah, for sure. That is definitely a thing. And I think um, it goes to speak to how important therapy is, because people ghost because they're afraid of that conflict or even confrontation. It's like, it doesn't need to be a confrontation. But if my whole life I have learned that if I bring something up, there's confrontation, then, I'm not going to do it. Or with people, especially with kids. And again, mine being teenagers, I've seen, like, people are losing their ability to learn how to speak to people because they're on their phones all the time,
Hmm.
especially these kids. And, you get kids whose parents maybe make them come. But with clients that do that, like, if someone goes us, of course, we have no show fees. So that helps. But if they fall off the face of the earth, we will. That For me, I normally tell my clinicians, like, we reach out 2 or 3 times, and if we don't hear back from them, then we're going to discharge you. And
Hmm.
it is what it is. We can't chase people down for treatment, but absolutely, we're seeing more of that. And it's unfortunate. I actually see a lot of that too. I was just telling my staff in our meeting the other day about how when we get new referrals in, it's important that we reach out right away, like 24 to 48 hours, no more than that, because we see a lot of ghosting where people reach out for an appointment and then it's almost like they get scared
Hmm.
after that. And if we don't reach out right away and get them scheduled, they're like, never mind, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't know if you've had that experience,
Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah.
so yeah, it's like, you get this like late at night, oh my gosh, I need help. And I send the email and then we reach out. If it's a couple days later, they're like, never mind, I changed my mind,
Yeah.
So
Now, are there any circumstances under which you encourage your staff to fire a client to say, hey, like whether the client is being inappropriate, or like I've had some people I partner with a lot, and they, like, I work at the school level and they're working private. So one of my students, she was fired by her therapist because the therapist felt she needed a higher level of care.
yeah,
And she's like, you
yeah,
really need to go into a program, and I'm firing you
yep,
unless you go into doing that. Or
yeah,
I have one client I fired because even though he wanted to keep working with me, he kept no showing. And I don't
yeah,
want to give the no show fees. Like that
yeah,
doesn't, I want to
yeah,
save
that doesn't
spaces
help anyone.
for people who
Sure.
actually are going to show up. So any
Yep.
thoughts, and what do you tell the clinicians who work under you? Like, this is when it's time to say, no, even if this client wants to work with you, we're not doing any more
Mhm.
sessions with them. We're not scheduling them anymore under certain circumstances.
Yeah. I mean, respect is number one, right? So if they're no showing or late canceling multiple times in a row, then I typically will tell my clinicians, if it's, and everybody's different as far as what they handle, but if it's been more than twice and it's back to back, you reach out to them and say, hey, if there's one more, we're just going to go ahead and call it. Like, we're going to have to discharge you because our time is valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, I want to provide that space for someone else who's waiting, and that's important. We've had a couple, it's not very common in private practice, but clients who will take advantage of the contact they have with you. And I don't require my clinicians to give their personal number out. Some of them have like a Google Voice number or something, but giving your personal number out, a lot of them do. And I am one that does,
Mm-hmm.
because
I do
most of
as
the time
well.
we don't see what you do.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we don't see a ton of people take advantage of that,
Right.
but I have, even myself, had times where I have had to have conversations with my clients that, like, one, I'm not your friend. Um, that sounds bad, but you can't just text me all day. Random stuff too. But, if it's an emergency, by all means, yes, reach out. But like, if my phone is dinging multiple times and you keep doing that, then I will discharge you too, because it's either that or block you. And that's not a therapeutic, healthy thing. Your therapist blocks you from texting. And then, of course, we've had a couple situations where some of my female clinicians have had men that maybe make them feel uncomfortable. And so if that's ever a situation, we definitely will, discharge those people, refer them out to somebody else. And normally I'm the one who handles those conversations because I want to kind of take that off my clinician's plate. But yes, and it's maybe taboo a little bit, but I think it's fair at times to kindly fire a client who's just dependent on you and they're not doing any work.
Mm-hmm.
I think we all have had those clients where it's like, I've seen you for 6 years and what are we even doing in sessions? Like, you're doing well. Like, clients that get so scared of leaving therapy that sometimes we fire them so that they can see that when they're on their own, they're okay. And I do that a lot with my clients where they're doing so well. And I'm like, normally your clients will say, I think I'm good, I'll wean off. But there are times where I say, I think you're good. Like, maybe we should start weaning off. And, with that caveat of, if things explode and the whole world is coming
Right.
to an end, like, I'm still here, you can come back. But kind of pushing our clients to do what we know they can do. And sometimes that means we have to fire them. Yeah.
What are some other, some misconceptions that you're seeing a lot of clients coming in with about therapy, or that you're having to, like, overcome even when you're at a dinner party and people are thinking about therapy? So what are some things that you're seeing either out just in the world at large, or with your own clients that are misconceptions, or with the young clinicians that you're talking to? Oh, I thought therapy was
Yeah.
going to be this. I was going to get magic robes and magic wand. And I was gonna
Yes.
So any misconceptions
Yeah.
about therapy that come to mind?
I think that a lot of clients, especially if they've never been to therapy, have a misconception that they have to guard what they say, that there will be any kind of judgment from me. So, or from any of us, right? So, letting them know that in order for them to truly get the most out of therapy, letting go of that idea that anything they say we're going to judge them for, because we don't. from a personal perspective, I get this, and I'm sure every therapist does all the time when you're out and someone says, "What do you do?" And you say, "I'm a therapist." And they're like, "Oh, are you psychoanalyzing me now?" Or I'm like, I don't do that. I've never done that. I don't want to do that. So I think that's also a misconception, is that as therapists, we go out there and we're analyzing people all the time. I mean, I might see patterns right in front of me, but I'm not going out of my way to analyze people. I know that's definitely a misconception I hear often.
Mhm.
And as far as my new therapist, when people are first starting, I will say most of what I hear as far as misconceptions they have coming into private practice anyway, a lot of them will come from a bigger community setting and will go into private practice and be shocked at how much more peaceful it is, because we don't deal a lot with emergencies in the private practice realm,
Mhm.
and the paperwork is a lot lighter. And so I do hear a lot of that from clinicians who come on that are like, this is so much easier than what I was doing before, wherever I was, which is definitely a bonus of private practice.
Do you feel, again, that there are just things that you wish you could have told people earlier? My son asked me, he's like, "Why do you work with young people?" And I said, well, I have worked with older, I do work with, people in their 50s and whatnot, but I
Hmm.
remember working with this one setting where this guy was saying, I wish somebody had told me these things earlier. And I felt,
Hmm.
I enjoy working with teens primarily so that I can plant some of those seeds, especially working
Yeah.
on things with relationships. Are there some
Yeah.
themes that you feel like, okay, I want to, yes, a 75-year-old can benefit from learning these things, but are there some
Hmm.
messages that you like in giving to people when they're a little bit younger so that they can hopefully avoid some relationship challenges, and any themes that you find yourself saying over and over again?
I don't do a lot of work with teenagers anymore. I have done them in the past. And what the themes that I've noticed more than anything with teens is like the increase in social anxiety.
Mm.
And so, the saying, if you only knew how little people were thinking of you. And that sounds horrible, but it's true.
Hmm.
You go out and everybody's thinking about themselves. Um, so I don't know about that. I think that for me, one thing that I just wish that I had known back in the beginning, and it took years to get me to the point where I had to go into my therapy sessions feeling confident. And I think a lot of therapists struggle with that because the weight that I which I guess we do carry some, but I would go in with just this heavy weight, especially with couples. It's like it's depending on me whether these people stay together or not. And that's just such a wrong way of thinking. That on if I'm honest, I still struggle with that sometimes, especially with couples. I get nervous because I'm like, if I can't regulate this well, or help them figure it out, then they could break up and then it'll be like me who failed. And so that is something that obviously I still work on, but trying to be consistent and confident in knowing that me being present, and I think any therapist, right? Like our goal is to help our clients. And just by sitting there and listening to them, which very few people do anymore, we're helping them beyond ways that I think we'll ever know. And just knowing that and reminding ourselves of that has been really important to me.
No, but I couldn't agree with you more. When I generally don't do couples sessions, but when I do couples work,
Mhm.
I do
Yeah.
feel, again, I just really want to, and again, I make sure I'm not favoring one over the other and striking that
Yes.
appropriate balance. And my
Yes.
hat is off to anybody who does full family therapy. Because
Yes.
every time I've had to do full family sessions with more than three people in them, I am just
Mhm.
sweaty afterwards. it's
It is
Whereas, my
complicated.
regular private practice one-on-one, it's okay, this is fun,
Yes.
this is relaxing, it's a
Yes.
conversation. But so hat is
Yeah.
off to it. And again, that's why it's great that there are different clinicians who specialize in different things. But and then you have
Hmm.
to know, this is my skill area and this is not my skill
Yeah.
area.
Yep. Yeah, and I just had literally this week a session, and I think this is also important that therapists deal with is um, when a client comes in and you realize this is beyond my scope,
Hmm.
right? And yeah, I'm not going to be like, oh, it's been 5 minutes, this is too much for me, you can leave. But having clients that for me is sometimes hard too, because it's like I meet with them and we have that first session and I want to help them, but I know ethically it is beyond something that I could really give them what they need, and knowing when to do that too,
Hmm.
knowing yourself and what you feel confident with, as far as clients, even if it's been, 6 months in and you're realizing like, I got to refer you out. And that can be really hard sometimes when you've established a relationship.
Do you still have like that when you were saying that there's this mentor social worker or psychologist, and he is someone that we go to for clinical cases
Hmm.
that are really challenging, but he is
Hmm.
a big one. He doesn't feel comfortable in working with clients with eating disorders. He's like, this
Yeah.
is not my skill area. So even though he's
Hmm.
been doing it for 35 years and he's the
Yep.
one we go to for our hard cases, knowing that he's got that one. But is there someone that you go to? Do you have a mentor still? Do you like get together with a bunch of other people who run practices? How do you keep
Hmm.
yourself, or do you just do like clinical consultation with people in
Hmm.
your practice? Like who
Yeah.
mentors you now at this point in your career?
We do staff meetings for my practice. So, and we do those for that reason, to staff our cases. So, those are typically where I get, and it's again incredible. Like, we all are licensed clinicians with different experience, different number of years of experience, new and old, different approaches. And so it's very rare that I try to staff a case that I don't feel like I'll walk away with some clarity based on just what some of my staff have shared. But there are really great, at least here in Indy, because I'm in Indiana, Facebook groups with private practice clinicians that you have to be a member to join. And that is a really great space too, not where we're sharing client information as much as like, does anybody have a book that they would recommend for this particular issue? Or tossing referrals back and forth. If I need to refer someone out, that's been wonderful too. So sometimes I wish we had a psychiatrist kind of tied to us. We don't at this point. Maybe that's a one-day thing.
Hmm.
That would be great to have, a psychiatrist come in once a month or once a quarter, even, to, talk about the more serious cases. But for now, we do most of it with our staff, just me and the people in my practice.
Yeah, and I think that's what, something that our clients might not realize is that none of us, again, no healthy therapist thinks they know it all. And no matter
Right.
how far you get along in your career, there are
Yeah.
always going to be things, and then there are going to be new things like, okay,
Yep.
what is the metaverse? What are the kids doing now? There's going to be some new
Yes.
drug or some new other thing
Hmm.
that, oh, I haven't heard
Yep.
of this kind of music. So
Yep.
we always have to continue to get our clinical education, but also just our social education about what's
Hmm.
going on out in the world. And
Yeah.
we never stop learning.
Yes. Yeah. And I don't know how old your son. You said you have a son, but my kids are very good at reminding me that I'm getting older all the time. I'm old and I don't know anything. But it is those times where even my kids, I'm like, I'm you can't keep up with everything, and you
Mhm.
get, and I love, as you can see behind me, I love to read. All the books I read are related to mental health and, human behavior and things like that. So I do a lot of self-help type stuff, a lot of reading and online trainings and podcasts and things like that. Like, I listen when I'm on a walk, just because the one thing, and again, my son, I don't know if it's a boy thing. I feel like it's a boy thing because my daughter never did this, but he does think he knows everything at 17. He
Yeah.
just turned 17. So one thing I always say to him is, as soon as you think you know everything, you know nothing,
Right.
because we always have somebody to learn from. And I will sometimes, my friends will be like, you read so many books, like you have to be reading the same stuff over and over again. Sometimes, yeah, in a book, you're like, I already know this, but there hasn't been one book that I have read where I haven't walked away with one bit of knowledge that I didn't know before.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's just a paragraph in that book or a chapter, but then that is what ends up helping me with client X, 6 months down the road or the next day. And I love everything about that. I do think it's important for us as therapists to always stay up to date with that kind of stuff. And I don't want to use the word CEUs because we all hate those, but just our own, like what you love, just keep learning more of, and then using each other to learn too.
Now, how do you, though, palate cleanse with things that are totally unrelated to mental health work in any way? So, after a long day of sessions and whatnot,
Hmm.
are you a person that just goes out in nature, or are you a
Yeah.
backgammon champion, or anything? What helps you to to get your
You
mind
know,
cleansed? Use some bad reality television, or
yeah, I
what's your
mean,
go to?
honestly, that yes, I do a bit of that. I've always been good about taking downtime for the most part. Before my kids got as old as they are, my downtime was time with them. And I love being with my kids. I love being outside when it's warm, but I don't like it when it's cold. So you're not going to find me out in the cold. Um, but I'll play, like, I love Candy Crush. If I'm honest, I'll play Candy Crush. I will put on something. And this is again, I can't think of the word I want to use, but I am the typical woman that sits in bed at night. I'll play Candy Crush and I'm putting on like a serial killer documentary. That is me. So I don't know. I mean, that's kind of mental health related, but there's something about documentaries again. I do love to learn and I think human nature is fascinating. So, um, documentaries about people. Like I think I've watched every 2020 and Dateline and all of those things that you can watch just because I find them entertaining. So that's kind of my downtime at night, if it's later. But otherwise, I have two dogs. I'll walk them, especially on the really nice days and anything in the sun. I go to the gym a lot. So that's definitely a good downtime activity for me as well.
As busy as you are with your multiple, the private practice and whatnot, what made you, say, I want to start a podcast? And what is your, I mean, from listening to your podcast, I feel like it's got a similar vibe of just exploring mental health,
Hmm.
but tell us a little bit about your podcast and what you wanted
Yeah.
to bring to listeners with that.
So when I wrote my book, it took me a couple years, and I just released it this year. And then I was talking to a couple other authors, people who had self-published, because that's what I did. And someone told me, there's not as many people reading anymore, which to me, that's sad. I love reading, but there are people are listening to podcasts. So that's probably something you should do. So I'm like, okay, whatever, I'll do a podcast. So started looking into it. I don't currently teach college, but I have for years. And so doing the podcast to me has been kind of a really fun outlet because it allows me to kind of take all the stuff in my head that I know that I want to share with people. And, it's almost like doing therapy, but on the other side of it. Because in therapy, we're quiet, we're listening. And
Hmm.
in this, with a podcast, you're talking, you're sharing, you're educating. And I love to educate people on mental health. I love sharing, what I know. And I have recently just kind of switched from hitting all over the board with mental health because, with mental health, it's like just throw a topic to me, I can talk about it. But trying to, dive more into that niche of relationships and parenting, because those are two things I see a lot. I've worked with a lot and I have probably the most experience with. So with the podcast I'm doing now, it's mental health with Amanda. And that's pretty much what I focus on more than anything. I'll hit anxiety and depression and other issues, but more than anything, focusing on the parenting and relationships.
If people want that podcast, they can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Where can they find that if they're looking for it?
Yeah, it's on YouTube, and then I do put it on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Mhm.
And if they want to find your book?
The book is on Amazon. It's called Making Sense of Dysfunction, Amanda Hill. So you can find that on Amazon pretty easily. And it's not on audiobook, although I'm kind of toying with that idea soon. So, but yeah, it's really easy to find there.
Okay. Any other lessons or messages that you want to give to the audience just about mental health generally and misconceptions or ideas that you're finding like, okay, I just want people to know this?
Yeah. The biggest thing that I really am a very firm advocate of for myself and for my clients is just being true to yourself, being honest to who you are. Like, being kind to others, but also I think a lot of people go throughout life kind of altering the way they view things or how they speak based on other people, including in therapy. And so, my encouragement for anyone listening, whether you're a client or a therapist or any other random person, is just to learn how to be yourself and be comfortable with that. Um, you know, unapologetically you, as hard as that is to say. Because I think that's really where we find peace and happiness. And you're going to attract the people who want to be around you when you are your true self, as opposed to being someone that you're not.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Because I couldn't agree more. I had a client just yesterday who was in that, he's having so much difficulty in his relationships. And he was saying,
Yeah.
because I have to figure out who I am and who I want to be.
Yeah.
Because you can't be a partner to anyone else until you know what is my identity. And until you can be consistent in that, you're a moving target for all the people who are around you. So, yeah.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, again, we want to thank you so much for coming on. And so I hope everyone will check out Amanda's podcast and her book. And for all of you listening, thank you for coming on this journey with us. And as we say every time, do whatever it takes to get you through this world. Remember, you are just not allowed to die.